Alright everybody, we've gone a good 4 videos on this channel with very little success. Normally that means the higher-ups would shut us down, but I've got a better idea. WinterStar 2. This time we cover video games, but we don't finish off the game with a video about business partnerships and an unlisted parody of Scott the Woz. Sequels are really a mixed bag in the gaming industry. Sure, there are always those standout sequels that improve everything from the original game, but a lot of the time they just lead to immense amounts of disappointment. However, if you're like me and you end up falling in love with the majority of games you ever play, you're bound to want a sequel to them. And god, are there a lot of sequels I want, so this video will be talking about that. Now, keep in mind that just because I bring up a potential sequel here doesn't mean that I think it's likely. A lot of sequels I want are unrealistic or wouldn't make financial sense for developers to make, but that doesn't mean I don't want them. I love Mario Sunshine, by far one of, if not the best 3D platformer ever made. Flood was a unique concept that allowed for some awesome level design, and Mario controls better in it than he ever has before or since. However, the game is far from perfect. The game is bogged down by a ton of minor bugs and some absurdly boring collectathons. Seriously, I don't think I've ever met a single person who doesn't eventually get bored of searching for all the blue coins. There are also a few levels that really stand out as being terrible. Pachinko, Lily Pads of Death, and the Watermelon Festival come to mind. I imagine a sequel to this game taking the mechanics and controls of the first game and putting them in a world on the scale of Super Mario Odyssey. Large, sprawling environments covered in goop for Mario to clean and shine sprites to obtain, preferably set in a different location than Isle Delfino to differentiate it. Or at least just add Delfino Plaza to Super Mario Odyssey. Come on, Nintendo, fans have done it, so can you. Pokemon is one of my favorite franchises of all time, but unlike most people, I wasn't introduced to it by the main series of games. No, I was introduced by the anime, but more so than that, Pokemon Colosseum for the Nintendo GameCube. Pokemon Colosseum isn't a game that has aged well at all, but the concept allows for so much potential. You play as more of an anti-hero for the first time in the series, and you have to steal shadow Pokemon back from an evil organization called Cypher. Also Miror B. Pokemon Colosseum got a sequel a few years later called Pokemon XD, and the gameplay and graphics were polished up wonderfully. Cypher returns, and you, once again, have to steal back all of the shadow Pokemon. XD takes a much more lighthearted tone than Colosseum, but the difficulty balancing is significantly more fair and it still has Miror B. Pokemon XD left off on a cliffhanger, with one of Cypher's leaders escaping and saying that he plans to continue Cypher's plans. Since then, we haven't heard anything about the Ore region or its story. Until Pokemon Go. Yeah, for some reason Pokemon Go was the game where they finally decided to acknowledge Pokemon Colosseum and XD again. You can catch Shadow Pokemon in Pokemon Go. I don't know if this is the Pokemon Company and Niantic foreshadowing that there are plans for a sequel, a la Meltan foreshadowing a new Pokemon in Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu, or if it's just a nod to these mostly forgotten spin-offs, but a girl can dream. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 was a disappointing sequel. The Force Unleashed 1 isn't a great game by any means, but it's one of the most beloved Star Wars titles ever released. The Force Unleashed 2 saw The Force Unleashed 1's legacy and decided, okay, but what if we make the story be about Starkiller's clone forgetting literally everything he cared about except for the girl who he was stuck in a forced romance with at the very end of the first game? Force Unleashed 2 didn't sit well with fans, and I understand why. However, the ending set up a sequel perfectly. Darth Vader gets captured and imprisoned on Dantooine, and then we see Boba Fett's ship following Starkiller and Juno, and that's where that story ends. Why? Apparently there were plans for a third game, but they were cancelled. Why? It's because LucasArts died. I know a new sequel isn't likely because the first 2 games are no longer canon, but I would really appreciate some closure on how Vader escaped and what happens to Starkiller and Juno. Also, if you're watching this and you're a Star Wars fan, I don't want to hear anything about Rian Johnson or Disney. They aren't related to this at all, and it's so annoying when people bring that stuff up as if they think they're entitled to something. I feel like I'm the only person in the world who has ever and will ever say Sonic Forces is my favorite Sonic game. Like, yeah, Generations is alright, but dude, Sonic Forces has the perfect Sonic plot. Dr. Eggman succeeding and taking over the world, and Sonic and friends leading a super cheesy resistance against him. That's hilarious. People who say the plot isn't taken seriously enough or whatever are really just begging for another Shadow the Hedgehog. Sonic Forces sets up its plot perfectly and keeps it going throughout the majority of the game. However, I do have one complaint. Infinite. This guy. I voiced this guy.
That day, I finally swore off gaming.
But how am I supposed to care about this guy? Who is he? He got roundhouse kicked and then decided he was going to take over the world. Okay, and? I'm fine with his lackluster backstory, but when you defeat him, he just disappears. That isn't a good way to close Infinite's character. I want to at least see him take off the mask, whether he's redeemed as a character or not. Sonic Forces 2 would be a perfect way to expand on the rebuilding that would have to take place after the first game, as well as a way to give some closure to Infinite as a character. His last line was, "I can still fight," so I want to see him make good on that. I want to see him show the world what he can do. And I want better avatar customization. It's fine as is, but I want more freedom, but mostly the Infinite thing. But seriously, give me better customization for my cat lady. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is my favorite game of all time, and Xenoblade Chronicles 1's HD remaster is the only game that has made me cry upon being revealed. I know a lot of people want a sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles X, but I've never owned a Wii U, so I have no way of really caring about that. I just want a Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I don't care if it's completely disconnected from the first two, just give me more Xenoblade, Nintendo. The Wii Sports games are awesome. Other than Wii Sports Club, we don't talk about that one. Why not give us a new one for the Switch? I don't really have much to say about this one, I just feel like even a remake of Resort would suffice, but I want some official Wii Sports styled games for the Switch instead of cheap shovelware knockoffs.
Sorry, Boris.
I understand. But then, what will you do?
I've got my own war to fight.
What the heck was that ending? Yeah, Kojima and Platinum Games left this fantastic hack-and-slash game on a cliffhanger, and now that Konami has essentially left Metal Gear Solid to rot, it seems incredibly unlikely that we'll ever get Metal Gear Rising 2, but Jesus Christ, this cliffhanger has been killing me ever since I beat the first game 4 or 5 years ago. This is the same deal as Wii Sports Resort. I'd be equally as happy with a port as I would be with a sequel. I personally didn't have any issues with the game's controls on 3DS, but the armies of people with arthritis because of this game would disagree. This game is such an awesome experience though, and I feel like everybody should get to play it without being subjected to broken bones in their hands. The writing is phenomenal, the gameplay is phenomenal in concept, and the game even had an awesome multiplayer mode. Now, Hades said after the credits that we're probably not getting a sequel for another 25 years, but I feel like at the very least, this game could be ported to Switch with the right Joy-Con's joystick being used to move the reticle instead of the touchscreen. And that would also make it a lot easier for left-handed people. Shovel Knight is one of the best indie games ever made. That's probably said all the time, but I feel like there's just some things like that that cannot be overstated. All of the extra campaigns that have come out since Shovel of Hope have been equally as high quality, and I can't wait for King of Cards and Showdown. I'm also kinda curious about that spin-off looking game they announced, but I really want a sequel to Shovel of Hope. Just imagine what they could do with a game where you play a Shovel Knight and Shield Knight together. Imagine how awesome a co-op mode like that could be. Either way, I'm happy with just the first game. Yacht Club made sure that Shovel Knight is endlessly replayable, and that's good enough for me. Heck, you can even make all the characters swap genders now. I can play as Girl Shovel Knight, and that's all that really matters. Okay, so it turns out you can't make sequels to YouTube channels. My solution is to just make a sequel to the business partnerships video. Here's my idea. Sole proprietorships. I just want to real quick say thanks to Chucky Conroy for footage from Pokemon XD, Colosseum, and Kid Icarus Uprising.